The lights of Kepler 7 station flickered in the eternal darkness of space like a small city, floating among the stars. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its many ports. Traders, diplomats, and travelers moved through its corridors. The station was neutral ground, a place where even enemies could meet in peace. Or so everyone believed. Ambassador Elena Reyes walked through the main diplomatic hall with confidence. She had represented Earth in dozens of negotiations. At 43 years old, she had spent nearly 20 years bringing peace between worlds. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style. She wore the formal blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind her walked 4 security officers. They wore light armor and carried standard sidearms. It was a small detail for such an important person, but this was supposed to be a safe place. The summit had gone well so far. Representatives from 12 different species had gathered to discuss new trade routes through the sector. Elena had just finished a productive meeting with the Velian Trade Consortium. She was heading back to the human quarters when she noticed something wrong. The corridor ahead was too quiet. The usual crowd of beings moving between meetings was gone. Her lead security officer, Lieutenant James Morrison, held up his hand. The team stopped. "Something's not right," Morrison said quietly. His hand moved toward his weapon. Before anyone could react, the walls exploded inward, not with fire or debris, but with targeted energy blasts that created perfect holes. Through those holes came the Jathi. They were massive creatures, nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that looked like natural armor. Their eyes were cold and yellow like a snake watching its prey. They moved with frightening speed for being so large. There were at least 20 of them, all wearing combat armor and carrying heavy plasma rifles. Morrison managed to draw his weapon and fire twice before a stun blast hit him. The other security officers tried to fight back, but they were overwhelmed in seconds. Elena reached for her emergency beacon, the device that would alert Earth to an attack. A scaled hand grabbed her wrist with crushing force. "I would not do that, human," a deep voice said. The Zathi holding her wrist was larger than the others. His armor was marked with symbols of rank. "You are far too valuable to damage, but your usefulness has limits." Elena stared at him without flinching. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? This is a neutral station. There are treaties. Treaties are for the weak," the Zathi leader interrupted. "I am Commander Vrath of the Zathi Dominion. And you, Ambassador Reyes, are now a guest of the Dominion." Other species who had been in nearby rooms began to emerge, drawn by the sounds of the brief fight. They stopped in shock when they saw the Zathi soldiers. Some ran. Others stood frozen in fear. The Zathi ignored them all. They had come for one target only. Vrath's soldiers efficiently secured Elena and her unconscious security team. They bound their hands with energy restraints that hummed with power. Any attempt to break them would result in a painful shock. Within 3 minutes of the attack beginning, the Zathi were already moving back toward their ship. The station's security forces arrived too late. By the time they reached the diplomatic corridor, the Zathi were already at their docking port. When station security tried to stop them, Vrath simply aimed his weapon at Elena's head. "Step aside or the human dies here," he said calmly. The security officers, a mix of different species, lowered their weapons. They could not risk causing an incident that might start a war. They watched helplessly as the Zathi boarding their vessel. The dark ship detached from the station and disappeared into quantum jump space before any pursuit could be organized. Inside the Zathi ship, Elena and her team were thrown into a holding cell. The walls were bare metal. The only light came from a dim strip along the ceiling. Morrison groaned as he regained consciousness. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. "Ambassador, are you hurt?" he asked, trying to sit up despite his bound hands. "I'm fine, Lieutenant," Elena replied. She was checking on the other 3 officers. They were all alive, though injured. "Is anyone seriously wounded?" The officers assessed themselves. Bruises, cuts, and stunning headaches, but nothing life-threatening. The Zathi had been careful. They wanted their hostages alive and in reasonable condition. "What do they want?" asked Corporal Sarah Chen, the youngest member of the security team. "Leverage," Elena said quietly. She had spent years studying alien psychology and politics. The Zathi Dominion had been expanding aggressively for decades. They respected only strength and viewed compromise as weakness. "They think they can use us to force Earth to give them something. Will Earth negotiate?" Morrison asked. Elena thought about the question. She thought about Earth's history, about the wars humanity had fought, about the principles that guided human civilization. She thought about the memorial on Earth that listed the names of every soldier, every person who had been lost far from home. She thought about the motto carved into its base, "We leave no one behind." "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know this, they've made a terrible mistake." Hours passed. The ship traveled deeper into Jathi space. Finally, Vrath came to their cell. He stood outside the energy barrier that served as a door, studying his prisoners like a scientist examining insects. "You are probably wondering about your fate," Vrath said. His voice carried a tone of amusement. "Let me explain. The Zathi Dominion requires certain resources. Your human colonies occupy 12 worlds that we need. For years, your government has refused to discuss relocating those colonies. This is unacceptable. Those worlds have been inhabited by humans for over 50 years, Elena said. Millions of people live there. Their homes, their families, are irrelevant," Vrath interrupted. "What matters is that we need those worlds, and now we have the leverage to take them. In a few hours, I will broadcast my demands to your government. They will have 72 hours to agree to our terms. If they refuse, you and your guards will be executed, one every 12 hours until compliance is achieved." Morrison lunged toward the barrier, but the energy field threw him back. "You're talking about starting a war?" Vrath laughed, a harsh sound like grinding rocks. "War with humans? Your species is weak. You care too much about individual lives. You write poetry about the value of a single person. You have laws protecting even your criminals. This makes you soft, makes you predictable. No rational government starts a war over 5 people when millions live in those colonies. Your leaders will calculate the cost and choose the logical option. They will surrender the colonies." "You don't understand us at all," Elena said quietly. "I understand you perfectly," Vrath replied. "You are like the Velians, the Karathi, the Fen. When we took their leaders, they negotiated. They surrendered what we wanted. Some even thanked us for being reasonable. You will do the same." He turned to leave, then paused. "I almost hope you do refuse. The Dominion would enjoy claiming your colonies by force. But your government is not that foolish." After Vrath left, the cell fell silent. The security officers looked shaken. They were military trained, ready to fight and die if necessary. But being hostages, being used as tools against their own people, was different. "Ambassador," Morrison said quietly, "do you think he's right? Will Earth negotiate?" Elena stood and walked to the energy barrier. She pressed her hand against it, feeling the tingle of power. Beyond the barrier, she could see Jathi soldiers moving through the ship. They moved with confidence, certain of their victory. "I've represented Earth for 20 years, Elena said. "I've negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, settlement disputes. I've seen Earth choose diplomacy over conflict 100 times. I've seen us make compromises, accept less favorable terms, all to avoid war." She turned to face her team. "But I've also studied our history. Real history, not the sanitized versions in textbooks." "What do you mean?" Chen asked. "Humanity has fought wars," Elena continued. "Terrible wars. Wars that cost millions of lives. And in every one of those wars there was a rule that we never broke. A principle that defined us even in our darkest moments." She paused. "We don't leave our people behind. When soldiers were captured, we moved heaven and earth to get them back. When civilians were taken hostage, we didn't calculate costs, we mounted rescues. There are stories of small units fighting against impossible odds to retrieve a single wounded comrade. But that was during wars," Morrison said. "This is different." "This is politics, is it?" Elena asked. "The Zathi think they understand us because they've watched us negotiate. They've seen us choose peace. They think that means we're afraid of conflict, that we value peace above all else. But they're wrong. We don't choose peace because we're weak. We choose it because we know what we're capable of when we choose war." She looked at each of her team members. "Commander Vrath is about to learn something that every bully eventually learns, that sometimes the quiet ones are quiet because they're strong enough not to need to prove it. And when you push them too far, when you threaten what they love most, that's when you discover what they've been holding back." "You think Earth will come for us?" Chen asked hopefully. "I think," Elena said slowly, "that Commander Vrath has no idea what he's just started. He thinks he's taken hostages that will force a political negotiation, but what he's actually done is give Earth a clear enemy, a clear objective, and a clear justification for action, and that's something humanity is very, very good at." Outside the cell, the Zathi ship continued its journey toward their home system. In the command center, Vrath prepared his message to Earth. He reviewed the list of demands, the threats, the timeline. Everything was planned perfectly. He had studied human psychology, human history, human weakness. This would work. It always worked. What Vrath didn't know, what he couldn't know because he fundamentally misunderstood humanity, was that his message would not prompt a negotiation. It would prompt a mobilization, the largest, fastest, most determined military response in human history. The message was transmitted on all frequencies, broadcast to every known human world and station. It appeared on screens throughout human space simultaneously. Commander Vrath's scaled face filled displays from Earth to the furthest frontier colony. "Humans of Earth," Vrath began. "I am Commander Vrath of the Zathi Dominion. We hold Ambassador Elena Reyes and 4 of your military personnel. They are alive and unharmed. They will remain so only if you meet our demands." The message listed the 12 colony worlds the Zathi wanted. It gave the 72-hour deadline. It showed brief footage of Elena and her team in their cell, proof they were alive. It ended with a warning. "Do not test our resolve. Do not attempt rescue. Any military action will result in immediate execution of all hostages. You have 72 hours to comply. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The transmission ended. Vrath sat back in his command chair, satisfied. The message had been received by every major human government, every military command, every news organization. Now came the waiting. Soon the humans would contact him. They would try to negotiate better terms. Eventually they would agree. It was inevitable. What Vrath didn't see, couldn't see because he was already deep in Zathi space, was the response his message triggered throughout human civilization. On Earth, in Geneva, an emergency session of the United Earth Council was called. In orbit around Mars, the Second Fleet received immediate mobilization orders. On colony worlds throughout human space, reservists reported for duty. Civilian shipyards began retrofitting merchant vessels with military hardware. And in the silence of space on ships and stations throughout the galaxy, humans everywhere heard the same thing in Vrath's message. Not a demand for negotiation, not a political crisis to be managed. A declaration of war. The Zathi thought a hostage would save them. They were about to learn they had made the biggest mistake in their civilization's history. They had taken one of humanity's own, and humanity was coming to take her back. No matter what it cost, no matter what stood in the way, they were coming. The emergency session of the United Earth Council began exactly 17 minutes after Commander Vrath's message finished broadcasting. In the council chamber in Geneva, representatives from every major human nation and colony world gathered. Normally, calling such a meeting took days of scheduling and preparation. Today, everyone simply appeared. They knew what this was about. The whole human sphere knew. Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb stood at the central podium. He was 62 years old, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen 3 decades of service protecting humanity's interests in space. He had fought in border skirmishes, commanded peacekeeping operations, and negotiated standoffs that could have become wars. But as he looked at the assembled representatives, he knew this was different. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 21 hours ago, Ambassador Elena Reyes and 4 security personnel were kidnapped from Kepler 7 station by Zathi military forces. The Zathi Dominion has made demands. They want us to abandon 12 colony worlds. They have given us 72 hours to comply. They have threatened to execute our people if we refuse. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted questions and demands. Webb waited patiently for the noise to die down. When it did, he continued, "I have consulted with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Colonial Defense Authority, and the Diplomatic Corps. We have evaluated all available options. Based on this evaluation, I am recommending immediate full military mobilization." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "We are going to war." Representative Sarah Mitchell from the North American Union stood. She was known for her careful, measured approach to problems. "Admiral Webb, have we attempted to negotiate? 72 hours is enough time to open diplomatic channels. Perhaps we can find a compromise that doesn't involve military action." "With respect, Representative Mitchell, there is no compromise available," Webb replied. "The Zathi are not interested in negotiation. They have made this clear in their message and their actions. They believe we will surrender because they believe we are weak. They believe we value peace above all else. They are about to learn they are wrong. But 12 colonies, another representative said. We're talking about potentially starting a war that could cost thousands of lives to save 5 people. Is that a reasonable exchange? Admiral Webb's expression hardened. I want to tell you all a story, he said. In 2047, before we had faster-than-light travel, before we met other species, a mining station on Ganymede suffered a catastrophic failure. 3 miners were trapped in a collapsed section. The rescue would cost more than those 3 miners would earn in their entire lifetimes. It would require resources that could save dozens of other lives elsewhere. By pure economic calculation, those 3 people should have been written off as an acceptable loss. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the representatives, but humanity didn't make the economically rational choice. We spent the resources. We risked other lives. We worked for 6 days straight because those 3 people were ours and we don't abandon our own. All 3 miners were rescued alive. That principle, that refusal to calculate the value of human life in economic terms, is what makes us human. The Jathi don't understand this, Webb continued. They think we're soft because we care about individual lives. They think our compassion makes us weak. They think we'll negotiate because that's what rational beings do. But they've made a fundamental error. They've confused our preference for peace with inability to wage war. They're about to discover their mistake. Representative Chen from the Asian Coalition stood. I agree that we cannot abandon our people. But the Zathi Dominion is powerful. They control 40 systems. Their military is formidable. If we attack them directly, we could lose ships, lose lives, and potentially fail to rescue the hostages anyway. What guarantees do we have? Admiral Webb activated a holographic display above the podium. It showed the locations of every human military vessel in known space. We have been at peace for 37 years, he said. During that time, we have built the largest, most advanced fleet in human history. Not for conquest, not for expansion, but because we learned long ago that peace requires the strength to defend it. The display zoomed out, showing ship movements across multiple systems. As of this moment, every major fleet unit has received mobilization orders. The 2nd Fleet is departing Mars orbit. The 5th Fleet is leaving the Centauri system. Colonial defense forces throughout human space are being consolidated. Merchant marine vessels are being retrofitted with military hardware. We are also activating reserve units and recalling every combat-experienced officer and crew member. How many ships are we talking about? Asked Representative Okafor from the African Federation. At full mobilization, 612 capital ships, not counting support vessels, fighters, and auxiliary craft, Webb replied. It will be the largest human military force ever assembled. And all of it is converging on Jathi space. The chamber fell silent. The scale of the operation was staggering. 600 ships, tens of thousands of personnel. The logistics alone would be a nightmare. The cost would be enormous, and all of it for 5 people. The vote must be unanimous, said the council president. This is a declaration of war. We must all agree or we seek another path. One by one, representatives stood to cast their votes. Some spoke briefly. Others simply said yes and sat down. There was no debate, no discussion of alternatives. The vote was taken in less than 10 minutes. The result was unanimous. War. While Earth's government made its decision, news of the kidnapping spread throughout human space. On colony worlds, in space stations, on mining outposts and research facilities, humans everywhere heard what the Zathi had done. And everywhere the response was the same. On Proxima Colony, a world of 5 million people, every single person of military age volunteered for service within the first day. The colonial government had to turn thousands away because they simply couldn't equip and transport everyone who wanted to help. On the Titan shipyards, workers volunteered for triple shifts. Ships that were scheduled for maintenance were rushed back into service. New vessels still under construction were accelerated through final preparations. The yard supervisor sent a message to Earth Command. We'll give you every ship we can fly. Just bring them home. Private ship owners offered their vessels. Retired military personnel came out of retirement. Medical staff prepared for casualties. Supply depots worked around the clock to prepare provisions for the fleet. Throughout human civilization, millions of people mobilized, not because they were ordered to, not because they were paid extra, but because 5 humans had been taken, and that was something humanity would not accept. On Mars, in the Second Fleet Command Center, Vice Admiral Sarah Chen reviewed the tactical situation. She was 48 years old and had commanded the Second Fleet for 3 years. Her fleet consisted of 147 ships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers. Under normal circumstances, it would take weeks to fully prepare a fleet this size for combat operations. Status report, Chen ordered. Her operations officer, Commander James Liu, pulled up displays showing fleet readiness. 93% of fleet units have acknowledged mobilization orders and are moving to Rally Point Alpha. The remaining 7% will join us within 12 hours. All ships are loading provisions and ammunition. We'll be ready to move out in 18 hours. Make it 12, Chen said. Every hour we wait is an hour those people are in enemy hands. Admiral, pushing the timeline that hard is necessary, Chen interrupted. I understand the logistics are difficult, Commander. I understand we're asking people to work miracles. But Ambassador Reyes doesn't have time for us to do this comfortably. Neither do her guards. Make it happen. Throughout the Second Fleet, organized chaos reigned. Supply ships shuttled between Mars and the fleet, carrying everything from ammunition to medical supplies to spare parts. Crew members who had been on leave were recalled. Ships that had been running on skeleton crews were brought up to full complement. Everyone knew what was at stake. Everyone worked without stopping. On one of the dreadnoughts, the EFS Indomitable, Captain Robert Torres addressed his crew. The ship could carry 2,000 personnel. Today, over 3,000 had reported for duty. Retired crew members had come back. Personnel from other ships had transferred. Everyone wanted to be part of this mission. I know many of you have questions, Torres said, his voice broadcast throughout the massive ship. I know some of you are wondering if this is worth it. 5 people versus a war. 5 lives versus thousands who might be lost. Let me answer that question right now. Yes, it's worth it. He paused, looking at the faces watching him from across the ship. The Jati think they understand us. They've studied our diplomacy, our preference for peaceful solutions. They think we're weak, but they don't understand what drives us. They don't understand that every human life matters to us, not as a slogan, not as a political statement, as a fundamental truth about who we are. 70 years ago, Torres continued, my grandfather was a Marine. His unit was trapped behind enemy lines during the border wars. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off. Command told them no rescue was possible, told them to surrender if they wanted to live. But humanity doesn't work that way. Another unit went in. They fought through enemy lines, took casualties, and got my grandfather and his team out. Not because it was strategically important, not because those Marines had special skills, but because they were ours. Today we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go into enemy space. We're going to face their defenses. We're going to bring Ambassador Reyes and her team home, and we're going to show the Zathi and every other species in this galaxy what happens when you take one of ours. Questions? A young ensign raised his hand. Sir, the Zathi threaten to execute the hostages if we attempt rescue. What if they carry out that threat? Torres's expression hardened. Then we make sure there isn't a Zathi military left capable of threatening anyone ever again. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't let threats determine our actions. We do what's right and damn the consequences. The crew erupted in cheers. Whatever fear they had felt, whatever doubts evaporated. This wasn't just a military operation. This was a statement about who humanity was and what humanity valued. While Earth's military mobilized, the diplomatic corps worked a different angle. Ambassador Chen, second only to Elena Reyes in the diplomatic hierarchy, sent messages to every major power in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, the Velian trade consortiums, the Karathi Empire, the Fen Collective, everyone. Her message was simple and direct. The Zathi have committed an act of war against Earth. We will respond accordingly. We recommend all neutral parties evacuate any personnel from Zathi space. We cannot guarantee their safety. The response from the galactic community was shock. Species that had known humanity for decades suddenly realized they had been viewing humans through a distorted lens. Yes, humans preferred diplomacy. Yes, they had been peaceful neighbors. But they had mistaken policy for character, preference for capability. The Karathi ambassador requested an emergency meeting. Ambassador Chen met him in a secure conference room in Geneva. The Karathi were an old species, one of the first to achieve faster-than-light travel. They had seen many species rise and fall. "Ambassador Chen," the Karathi began, "I must urge restraint. The Zyathi Dominion is powerful. A war with them could drag on for years. Thousands could die. Surely some compromise?" "No," Chen interrupted simply. "But Ambassador, I have studied your history. You are a reasonable people. You value life. You seek peaceful solutions. This aggressive response is unlike you." "With respect, Ambassador, you're wrong," Chen replied. "You've seen one side of humanity, the side that builds, that explores, that seeks knowledge and friendship. But we are not one-dimensional. We are capable of great compassion and great violence. The Zyathi have triggered the latter. Over 5 individuals? Over the principle that we don't abandon our own," Chen said firmly. "The Zyathi studied our diplomacy. They missed our history. They don't know about World War II, where humanity fought across an entire planet for years. They don't know about the Martian Independence War, where we fought our own brothers and sisters because principles mattered. They see peace and assume weakness. It's a fatal error." The Karathi ambassador looked troubled. "I have lived for 3 of your centuries. I have seen many wars. They all end the same way, in grief and regret. Even the winners lose something precious. Is your ambassador's life worth what you will lose?" Chen stood, the meeting clearly over. "In my language, we have an old saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The Zyathi have done evil. They have taken our people. They think we will accept this because the cost of resistance is high. But they're wrong. The cost of acceptance is higher. If we let this stand, if we negotiate, we tell every hostile species in the galaxy that taking humans hostage works. That's a price we won't pay." As the Karathi ambassador left, Chen looked at the display showing the Zyathi home system. Somewhere in that system, Elena and her team were prisoners. They were waiting, hoping, probably afraid, but they weren't abandoned. The entire might of human civilization was coming for them. The 72-hour deadline ticked down. 50 hours remaining. 48. 45. The Zyathi waited for Earth's response, expecting desperate diplomatic messages, offers to negotiate, pleas for more time. Instead, they got silence. Earth sent no messages to the Zyathi, made no offers, requested nothing. The silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. In his command ship, Commander Vrath began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. This wasn't the response he expected. Where were the negotiations? Where were the offers of compromise? Why wasn't Earth begging for more time? His intelligence officers brought reports of human fleet movements. Initially, Vrath dismissed them. Of course, the humans were positioning some ships. It was a show of force, nothing more. But as the hours passed and more reports came in, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. Hundreds of human ships were moving, all heading towards Zyathi space, all combat ready. "This is a bluff," Vrath told his staff. "They are trying to intimidate us into reducing our demands. Hold firm. They will break." But in the privacy of his quarters, Vrath studied the reports more carefully. The scale of the human response was unprecedented. These weren't just border defense forces. This was total mobilization. The humans were treating this like a full-scale war. Over 5 people. It made no sense. No rational species committed this level of resources over such a small number, unless the humans weren't rational. Unless they operated on principles that Vrath didn't understand, couldn't understand because his species simply didn't think that way. For the first time since capturing the ambassador, Vrath wondered if he had made a mistake. But it was too late now. The Zyathi had committed. They couldn't back down without losing face. The path forward was set. On the EFS Indomitable, Captain Torres received the final mobilization order. The 2nd Fleet was ready. The 5th Fleet was ready. Ships from across human space were converging on 3 different rally points. In 36 hours, they would be ready to jump to Zyathi space. Torres looked at the picture on his desk. It showed his grandfather in marine dress uniform taken 70 years ago. The old man was long dead now, but Torres remembered his stories. Remembered the lesson his grandfather had taught him. We take care of our own, always, no matter what. We're coming, Ambassador, Torres said quietly to the empty room. Hold on, we're coming. The galaxy watched and waited. Some species evacuated their people from Zyathi space, heeding Earth's warning. Others stayed, thinking the whole thing would blow over. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions, trying to find diplomatic solutions. But Earth wasn't interested in diplomatic solutions. Earth was interested in sending a message written in fire and steel across the void of space, a message that would be remembered for generations. They thought a hostage would save them. They were about to learn the truth. Nothing could stand against humanity when humanity decided to act. The 3 human task forces arrived at the edges of Jathi space simultaneously. It was a feat of coordination that impressed even the most experienced military analysts in the galaxy. 3 separate fleets, coming from 3 different directions, all emerging from Quantum Jump at exactly the same moment. It was a statement of intent, a demonstration of capability, and a promise of what was to come. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the EFS Defiant, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought. The ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers, from bow to stern, bristling with weapons and carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Around him, the First Fleet maintained perfect formation. 204 ships arranged in a pattern that maximized both defensive coverage and offensive capability. "All ships report ready, sir," his operations officer reported. Second and Fifth Fleets confirm they are in position. Webb studied the tactical display. The 3 human fleets now controlled the approach routes to Jathi Prime, the heart of the Dominion. Between them and the Jathi homeworld lay a formidable defense network. Orbital platforms, minefields, defense stations, and the Jathi home fleet of over 300 vessels. Under normal circumstances, attacking such defenses would be suicide. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Open a channel to all Jathi military frequencies," Webb ordered. "Make sure they hear this loud and clear." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Webb took a breath, then spoke with a calm that was somehow more frightening than any shout. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Earth Forces. 48 hours ago, your commander Vrath kidnapped Ambassador Elena, Reyes, and 4 Earth security personnel from neutral territory. He made demands. He set a deadline. He threatened to execute our people if we didn't comply." He paused, letting his words sink in across the Jathi communication networks. "Let me be very clear about something. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't abandon our own. For 2 centuries, humanity has had one sacred rule: no one left behind. You took one of ours. Now you'll learn why we're the only species in the galaxy that has a saying: come back with your shield or on it. You have 1 hour to release Ambassador Reyes and her team unharmed and surrender Commander Vrath to face justice. If you comply, we will withdraw peacefully. If you don't, we will take them back by force, and we will dismantle every military installation between us and them. This is your only warning. Choose wisely." The channel closed. On the bridge of the Defiant, the crew waited in tense silence. Everyone knew the Jathi wouldn't surrender. This wasn't really an offer. It was a formality, a chance to avoid bloodshed that everyone knew wouldn't be taken. But it had to be made. Humanity fought by rules, even when its enemies didn't. In the Yao, Jathi Command Center on the primary orbital platform, military leaders gathered around Commander Vrath. The human fleet's arrival had sent shockwaves through the Dominion. They had expected some military posturing, maybe a small force to show strength while negotiations proceeded. Not this. Not 600 warships arranged in battle formation. "They're bluffing," Vrath insisted. "This is political theater. They won't attack because they know we'll execute the hostages." His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Krell, wasn't so sure. "Commander, they brought their entire fleet. Every major vessel they have is here. Species don't mobilize like this for a bluff." "They're human," Vrath snapped. "They're weak. They value individual lives over strategic objectives. That's why this plan worked with the Velians, the Karathi, and a dozen other species. Take a leader, make demands, and they fold. The humans will be no different." "But sir, their message was designed to intimidate us," Vrath interrupted. "I've studied them. I know how they think. They're hoping we'll panic and surrender. They want to resolve this without fighting because fighting means casualties, and casualties mean political problems for their government. We hold firm, they'll break." Krell wanted to argue but knew it was pointless. Vrath had committed himself to this course of action. The Dominion had committed. They couldn't back down now without appearing weak to the entire galaxy. Sometimes pride was more dangerous than any weapon. Activate all defense systems, Vrath ordered. Deploy the home fleet. If the humans want to fight, we'll show them why the Dominion has never been defeated. The hour passed. Admiral Webb watched the countdown timer reach 0. The Zyathi had responded by powering up their weapons and moving their fleet into defensive positions. They were choosing to fight. All ships, Webb said calmly. Weapons free. Execute Battle Plan Omega. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for generations. The human attack was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It wasn't a simple charge at the enemy. It wasn't a careful advance. It was a precisely coordinated ballet of destruction that leveraged every advantage humanity had spent decades developing. The Second Fleet, under Vice Admiral Chen, moved first. Her ships accelerated toward the outer defense perimeter at speeds that alarmed the Zyathi. They weren't advancing cautiously. They were charging like ancient cavalry, except these cavalry carried weapons that could crack planets. The Zyathi outer defenses opened fire. Plasma beams and missile swarms reached out toward the human ships. Point defense systems on the human vessels intercepted most of the incoming fire. What got through hit shields that had been designed and tested by the most paranoid engineers humanity could produce. 3 human destroyers took damage. 1 lost its forward shields. Another had its portside weapon batteries disabled. But the charge didn't stop. The Second Fleet smashed into the outer defense line like a hammer hitting glass. Human railguns, accelerating projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through Zyathi defense platforms. Missile volleys overwhelmed point defenses, and then the human ships did something that shocked the Zyathi defenders. They didn't stop to engage in a traditional exchange of fire. They flew straight through the defensive line, destroying targets as they passed, and kept going. Before the Zyathi could reorient, the Fifth Fleet hit them from a different angle. While the Second Fleet drew attention, the Fifth Fleet's heavier dreadnoughts engaged the Zyathi home fleet directly. The battle was fierce. Ships on both sides took damage. 1 human cruiser exploded when a lucky shot penetrated its reactor shielding. But for every human ship damaged, 3 Zyathi vessels went silent. The Zyathi were brave. They were experienced warriors, but they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand. The humans fought with a precision and coordination that seemed impossible for organic beings. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship was. Every attack was synchronized. Every defense was layered. What the Zyathi didn't know was that humanity had spent decades developing combat AIs. Not artificial intelligence that could think independently. Human treaties forbade that. But sophisticated systems that could process battlefield data, coordinate with other ships, and execute complex tactical maneuvers in microseconds. The humans fought as one organism with 600 bodies. While the main fleets engaged, something else was happening. Small craft, barely visible on scanners, were moving through the chaos. These were the insertion teams. 50 specialized assault ships, each carrying a squad of Terran Reapers, humanity's elite special operations force. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison led Reaper Team 7. He was Elena Reyes's nephew, though no one in the chain of command knew that. When he'd heard his aunt had been taken, he'd volunteered for the first assault wave. His team's mission was simple in theory, nearly impossible in practice. Infiltrate a Zyathi military installation, locate and extract 5 hostages, and get out alive. 2 minutes to insertion point, Morrison's pilot announced. The assault ship shuddered as point defense fire from nearby platforms tried to track it. The ship's stealth systems and the chaos of the main battle gave them cover, but it wouldn't last forever. Morrison checked his team. 12 operators, the best humanity had. Each one had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come back. Each one had trained for years for exactly this type of operation. Hostage rescue in hostile territory. The hardest mission in the book. Listen up, Morrison said over the team channel. Intelligence says the hostages are being held in the security complex on Installation 7. It's heavily guarded. We go in fast, we go in hard, and we get our people out. Rules of engagement. Anyone with a weapon is a target. Anyone without a weapon gets stunned, not killed. We're here for our people, not genocide. What if the guards try to execute the hostages when we breach? Asked Corporal Davis, the team's youngest member. Then we make sure we're faster than they are, Morrison replied. We've trained for this. Trust your training. Trust your team. And remember, we don't leave anyone behind. That includes each other. The assault ship shook as it entered the installation's atmospheric envelope. Zagathi fighters tried to intercept, but human escorts engaged them, buying precious seconds. The ship dropped fast, using the installation's own mass to hide from sensors. They hit the landing zone hard. The rear ramp dropped before the ship fully settled. Morrison's team poured out weapons ready. They were met immediately by Zagathi security forces. The firefight was brief and brutal. Human weapons technology had advanced significantly in recent decades. The pulse rifles the Reapers carried could penetrate Zagathi body armor at range. But more than technology, it was training and determination that made the difference. The Reapers moved like they had rehearsed this exact scenario 1,000 times. Because they had. They breached the installation's outer wall using shaped charges that cut through meters of reinforced metal like paper. Alarms blared. More guards responded. The Reapers cut through them with professional efficiency. They weren't cruel, weren't sadistic, but they were absolutely determined, and that made them terrifying. Inside the installation, Commander Vrath watched in growing horror as his defense network crumbled. The human fleet was overwhelming his forces. It wasn't close. It wasn't even particularly difficult for them. The humans were systematically destroying every military asset between them and the planet. Sir, Krell reported, his voice shaking, we have multiple intrusion reports. Human special forces have landed at 7 different installations. They're fighting toward the detention centers. Vrath felt ice in his veins. Execute the hostages now. Sir, if we do that, the humans will— I gave you an order, Vrath shouted. Krell sent the command. In the detention center where Elena and her team were held, 2 guards received the execution order. They looked at each other, then at their prisoners. Elena saw the expressions on their faces change. It's time, isn't it? She said calmly. One of the guards raised his weapon. Commander Vrath's orders. I'm sorry, but the wall exploded inward. Not the door, not a window. The solid exterior wall simply ceased to exist in a cloud of dust and debris. Through the gap came human soldiers moving with frightening speed and precision. The guard who had been about to shoot never got the chance. A pulse of energy hit him in the chest, and he dropped, stunned. The second guard tried to raise his weapon but froze when he found himself staring at 3 human rifles pointed at his head. Don't, Morrison said quietly. The guard dropped his weapon. Morrison rushed to the cell using a device that overrode the energy barrier in seconds. Elena and her security team stood, hardly able to believe what they were seeing. Ambassador Reyes, Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Terran Reapers. We're here to bring you home. Elena recognized the name, recognized the eyes behind the tactical visor. Jake? Yes, ma'am. But we can do the family reunion later. Right now, we need to move. Can you walk? We can run if we have to, Elena said. Her security team nodded in agreement. They were bruised and tired but unbroken. Morrison's team formed a protective circle around the former hostages. They moved back the way they came, fighting through Zagathi security forces who were now desperate and disorganized. The assault ship waited where they'd left it, its weapons laying down covering fire. They ran across the open ground. Weapons fire tracked them. One Reaper took a hit to the shoulder but kept moving. They reached the ship, bundled inside, and the pilot immediately pulled up. The ship accelerated away from the installation, weaving through defensive fire. Reaper 7 to Fleet Command, Morrison transmitted. We have the package. All 5 hostages recovered alive, returning to rally point. Similar messages came from 6 other Reaper teams across the Zagathi defensive network. Every hostage location had been hit simultaneously. Every extraction was successful. The Zagathi had tried to execute some of the hostages, but in every case the Reapers had been faster. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Webb received the reports. He allowed himself a small smile. All teams successful, he announced to his bridge crew. A cheer went up. Open a channel to Commander Vrath, Webb ordered. When Vrath's image appeared on screen, the Zagathi commander looked defeated. Behind him, his command center showed signs of damage. Emergency lighting flickered. Commander Vrath, we have recovered our people. All of them. Alive and unharmed. As promised, we will now dismantle your military infrastructure. This could have been avoided. You could have surrendered them peacefully. You chose otherwise. Live with the consequences. You've started a war you can't win, Vrath said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Commander. You started a war you've already lost. We're just finishing it. The human fleet turned its full attention to the Zyathi military installations. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was a cold, calculated dismantling of the Dominion's ability to project power. Orbital platforms were reduced to debris. Shipyards were destroyed. Command and control centers were disabled. The Zyathi home fleet, or what was left of it, retreated to the planet's surface. Webb could have pursued, could have destroyed them completely. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was rescue and deterrence. Both had been accomplished. All fleets cease fire, Webb ordered. Hold position. The guns fell silent. In the sudden quiet, the magnitude of what had happened became clear. In less than 6 hours, humanity had penetrated the strongest defenses in Zyathi space, rescued their people, and crippled the Zyathi military. The cost had been 23 human ships damaged, 4 destroyed, and 312 casualties. The cost to the Zyathi was considerably higher. Over 200 ships destroyed or disabled. Every major military installation in their home system damaged or destroyed. Their ability to project military power was gone. On the assault ship returning to the fleet, Elena sat with her security team. They were wrapped in thermal blankets, drinking water, being checked by medics. They were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. Ambassador, Morrison said quietly, sitting beside her. When I was a kid, you told me that humanity's greatest strength was our compassion. I didn't really understand what you meant then. And now? Elena asked. Now I understand that compassion doesn't mean weakness. It means caring enough to fight for what matters, to refuse to abandon people, to cross the galaxy if necessary to bring our own home. He looked at her seriously. The whole fleet came, Aunt Elena, not part of it. Not a token force. Every major vessel we had. 600 ships and thousands of people, all because we don't leave anyone behind. Elena felt tears on her face. How many did we lose? 4 ships. 312 people. Morrison's voice was heavy. They knew the risks. They came anyway. Because you were one of ours. Because it mattered. Elena closed her eyes. 312 people had died to save 5. By any rational calculation, it was a terrible trade. But humanity had never operated on pure rationality. They operated on principle, on the fundamental belief that every human life had value, and that value wasn't determined by cost-benefit analysis. Then we make sure their sacrifice meant something, Elena said firmly. We make sure that every species in this galaxy knows what happened here, that they understand what humanity truly is. Around her, the Reapers who had risked their lives to save her nodded in agreement. They had sent a message, written it in the stars above Zyathi Prime, a message that would echo through the galaxy for generations. We are humanity. We don't abandon our own, and nothing in this universe can stand against us when we decide to act. The rescue of Ambassador Reyes and her team should have been the end of it. By any reasonable military doctrine, the objective had been achieved. The hostages were safe. The point had been made. It was time to withdraw, declare victory, and go home. But Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb had no intention of withdrawing. Not yet. He stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the tactical display showing Zyathi Prime and its surrounding infrastructure. The planet itself was untouched. Civilian areas were intact, but the military installations that orbited it like a crown of thorns were damaged and reeling. Commander Okafor, Webb said to his strategic operations officer. Status of Zyathi military capabilities. Commander Okafor pulled up detailed analysis on the main display. Sir, their home fleet is reduced to approximately 30% effective strength. Orbital defense platforms are 70% disabled or destroyed. Command and control infrastructure is fragmented. Their shipyards are heavily damaged. Functionally, the Zyathi have lost the ability to project military power beyond their home system. But they retain the ability to rebuild, Webb stated. Yes, sir. Within 2 to 3 years, they could restore most of their capabilities. Within 5 years, they could pose a threat again. Webb nodded slowly. He had known this would be the situation. The question now was what to do about it. He could withdraw, take the political victory, and hope the Zyathi learned their lesson. Or he could ensure this never happened again. Not to humanity, not to anyone. He opened a secure channel to Vice Admiral Chen and Rear Admiral Jackson, who commanded the Fifth Fleet. Their faces appeared on split screens. Admirals, our people are safe. Mission accomplished. Now we need to discuss what comes next. Chen spoke first. Admiral, the Galactic Council is already screaming about proportional response. We've made our point. Some are arguing that further action would constitute an aggressive war rather than a rescue operation. The Galactic Council isn't standing on my bridge, Webb replied. They didn't have their ambassador kidnapped. They didn't have their people threatened with execution. We did, and I'll be damned if I let the Zathi rebuild just so they can try this again in 5 years with some other species. What are you proposing? Jackson asked. Webb straightened. I'm proposing we finish this. Not by targeting civilians, not by occupying their world, but by ensuring the Zathi military is never again capable of threatening peaceful species. We dismantle what's left of their war machine. We destroy every shipyard, every weapons production facility, every military installation in this system. We leave them with enough to defend their homeworld but not enough to threaten others. That's a significant escalation, Chen said carefully. It moves us from rescue operation to regime change territory. Does it? Webb challenged. The Zathi government remains in power. Their civilian infrastructure remains intact. We're not occupying them. We're not demanding reparations. We're simply removing their ability to do to others what they tried to do to us. Is that escalation or prevention? Jackson leaned back in his chair. The Council won't like it. The Council doesn't have to like it, Webb said. They have to understand it. The Zathi broke every rule of civilized behavior. They violated neutral territory, took hostages, threatened execution. They gambled that humanity would fold because other species have folded. They lost that gamble. Now they pay the price. There was a moment of silence. Then Chen smiled slightly. You've already made up your mind, haven't you, sir? I have, but I wanted you both to understand my reasoning. Because when we return home, there will be questions. There will be investigations and committees and people demanding to know why we didn't stop after the rescue. I need you both to be able to answer those questions honestly. What if we disagree with your decision? Jackson asked. Then tell me now and I'll log your objection. But the operation will proceed. Both admirals looked at each other, then back at Webb. Chen spoke for both of them. No objection, sir. We're with you. The Zathi need to learn this lesson permanently. So does the rest of the galaxy. Webb nodded. Then let's get to work. Commander Okafor, target analysis of all remaining military infrastructure in Zathi Prime System. I want a list of every installation, every facility, every orbital platform that has military capability. Cross-reference with civilian proximity. I want 0 civilian casualties if possible. Yes, sir, Okafor replied, already working. Within 30 minutes, a comprehensive target list appeared on the main display. Shipyards, weapons factories, military command centers, training facilities, everything that made the Zathi Dominion a military power. Notably absent from the list were civilian targets, residential areas, commercial centers, farming regions, infrastructure that kept ordinary Zathi alive and functioning. Webb had meant what he said. This wasn't genocide. This wasn't even regime change. This was surgical removal of military capability. All fleet units, this is Admiral Webb, he announced on the fleet-wide channel. We have secured our people. Now we ensure this never happens again. Target packages are being distributed to all vessels. You will note that these are exclusively military targets. We are not here to harm civilians. We are not here to destroy a civilization. We are here to ensure the Zathi military is never again capable of threatening peaceful species. He paused, letting his words sink in across hundreds of ships. Some of you may question whether this is necessary. Some may feel we should withdraw now that Ambassador Reyes is safe. I understand those feelings. But consider this. If we leave the Zathi military intact, they will rebuild. They will try this again. Maybe not against us. Maybe against the Velians or the Karathi or some species we haven't even met yet. And when that happens, those victims will wonder why we didn't act when we had the chance. We are not conquerors. Webb continued. We are not invaders. But we are protectors. Not just of humanity, but of the principle that civilized species don't take hostages, don't threaten murder to achieve political goals. Today we teach that lesson. Begin operations. The human fleet moved with the same precision they had shown during the rescue. Ships broke into smaller task forces, each assigned to specific targets. The attack was methodical, almost clinical. There was no rage, no hatred. Just professional military personnel executing their orders with devastating efficiency. The Venzar shipyards, capable of producing 20 capital ships per year, were the first to go. Human missiles streaked through space, impacting the massive construction facilities. Secondary explosions rippled through the yards as fuel stores and ammunition magazines detonated. Within minutes, the shipyards that had taken decades to build were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The Cathral Military Academy, where Xathi officers trained, was next. Precision strikes disabled the facility without destroying it. The cadets were given time to evacuate. Then the command centers, the armories, the training facilities were systematically destroyed. The buildings that housed students remained intact. The infrastructure that trained warriors did not. Across the system, the same scene repeated. Military targets were engaged and destroyed. Civilian areas were avoided. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed everything, could have sterilized the planet, but chose not to. Chose precision over destruction, justice over revenge. On the surface of Xathi Prime, civilian Xathi watched the skies with terror and awe. They saw their military installations burning like new stars in the night sky, saw the pride of the Dominion reduced to wreckage, and yet their homes stood. Their cities remained. The humans could have killed them all but chose not to. In the Xathi government complex, the Dominion Council met in emergency session. Commander Vrath was there, facing the Council's wrath. The mission he had assured them would work had become a catastrophe. "You told us the humans were weak," Chancellor Mordath hissed. The Chancellor was ancient, nearly 300 years old, and had led the Dominion for decades. "You told us they would negotiate. You told us this plan was foolproof." "I was working from incomplete data," Vrath said, but his voice lacked conviction. The humans had never responded with force to diplomatic pressure before. "Every projection suggested they would seek a peaceful resolution." "Your projections were wrong," Mordath said coldly. "And now our military is in ruins, our shipyards destroyed, our defense network shattered. You have crippled the Dominion in a single day." "We can rebuild," Vrath insisted. "Given time." "We won't be given time," interrupted Sub-Commander Krell, who had been monitoring human communications. "The human admiral is broadcasting a message. To us and to the entire galaxy." "Put it on," Mordath ordered. Admiral Webb's face appeared on the Council's main screen. He looked tired but resolute. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiant hummed with activity. "Members of the Xathi Dominion Council, I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb. I want you to understand what has happened here today and why. Your military forces kidnapped a diplomatic envoy from neutral territory. You threatened to execute her and her team if your demands were not met. You believed we would negotiate because you thought we were weak." Webb's expression hardened. "You were wrong. But this isn't about revenge. This isn't about conquest. This is about ensuring this never happens again. In the past 6 hours, we have systematically disabled every military installation in your home system. Your shipyards are destroyed. Your weapons production is gone. Your military command infrastructure is in ruins. However," Webb continued, "you will note that civilian casualties are 0. We have not targeted your cities, your farms, your infrastructure. Your people are alive and unharmed. We could have done much worse. We chose not to, because humanity doesn't wage war on civilians. But make no mistake, your military is broken and will remain broken." Mordath leaned forward. "What are your terms for withdrawal?" "I'm not negotiating," Webb said simply. "I'm informing. The Xathi Dominion will surrender Commander Vrath and all officers involved in the kidnapping. They will stand trial for their crimes. The Dominion will pay reparations to the families of the humans who died in this operation, and the Dominion will agree to permanent monitoring of any future military buildup." "And if we refuse?" Mordath asked. "Then we continue operations until you accept. We can stay here for months if necessary. We have the supplies. We have the will. The question is, how much more of your military do you want to lose before you accept the inevitable?" The channel closed. The Xathi Council sat in stunned silence. They had started this confrontation believing they held all the cards. Now they sat in their council chamber watching their military burn and realized they had never understood what they were facing. "We have no choice," Krell said quietly. "Further resistance is pointless. They've won." "We could fight," Vrath said desperately. We still have ground forces, planetary defenses. Are you insane? Mordeth snapped. They just destroyed our orbital infrastructure in hours. If they wanted to destroy the planet, they could. The only reason we're alive is because they chose to let us live. You've already done enough damage, Vrath. You will surrender yourself and face their justice. I am a commander of the Dominion. I will not. You are a fool who started a war we cannot win, Mordath interrupted. And you will do as ordered, or I will have you dragged to the humans in chains. Choose. Vrath looked around the council chamber. He saw no sympathy, no support. Only anger and disgust. His grand plan had failed utterly. The humans had been nothing like he predicted. And now he would face the consequences. I will surrender, he said quietly. 3 hours later, a small Zyathi shuttle approached the human fleet. It carried Commander Vrath and 17 other officers who had been involved in the kidnapping. They were handed over to human custody without ceremony or fanfare. Vrath found himself in a detention cell aboard the Defiant. It was clean, well lit, and far more comfortable than the cell where he had kept Ambassador Reyes. A human guard stood outside, watching him without expression. Admiral Webb came to see him once. He stood outside the cell, studying the Zyathi commander. Do you understand what you did wrong? Webb asked. I underestimated you, Vrath said bitterly. No, Webb corrected. You made a fundamental error in understanding what drives humanity. You saw our preference for peace and mistook it for inability to wage war. You saw our value for individual lives and mistook it for weakness. You thought we would calculate costs and benefits like a computer and choose the logical option. Webb leaned closer to the cell barrier. But humans aren't computers. We're not purely logical. We're driven by principles, by emotions, by bonds that don't always make rational sense. And one of our deepest principles is that we protect our own, at any cost, against any odds. You didn't just kidnap an ambassador. You violated something sacred to us. What will happen to me? Vrath asked. You'll stand trial. You'll face justice. If found guilty, you'll be punished. But you'll be treated fairly, given legal representation, allowed to present a defense. Because even though you showed no mercy, we will. Not because you deserve it, but because that's who we are. Webb turned to leave, then paused. The Zyathi Dominion will recover from this. In time, you'll rebuild some of your military capability. We're not monsters. We won't keep you defenseless, but you'll never again be strong enough to threaten others. And you'll always remember what happened when you tried to take what was ours. Across Zyathi Prime System, human ships continued their work. By the time they were finished, every military installation was disabled or destroyed. The Dominion's ability to project power beyond its own borders was gone. But the planet itself was intact. The people were alive. Civilization continued. It was a demonstration of power, but also of restraint. Humanity could have done much worse. The fact that they didn't made the message even clearer. We are not your enemies unless you make us so. But if you do, nothing in this universe will protect you. The galaxy watched what happened at Zyathi Prime. They saw a civilization that had seemed untouchable humbled in a single day. They saw the careful precision with which humanity dismantled military infrastructure while preserving civilian life. They saw power combined with restraint, fury tempered with justice, and every species in known space understood that they had badly misjudged humanity. The peaceful explorers, the friendly diplomats, the cooperative neighbors. They were all those things, but they were also warriors who would cross the galaxy to protect their own. Who would fight impossible odds for principle? Who would show mercy even to enemies who had shown none to them? The Zyathi had thought a hostage would save them. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand. And now they would spend generations remembering the lesson. Never underestimate humanity. Never take what's theirs. Because when humans decide to act, nothing can stand against them. 7 days after the Battle of Zyathi Prime, Ambassador Elena Reyes stood before the Galactic Council. The massive chamber on the neutral station of Concordia held representatives from 47 different species. The chamber was designed to be impressive, with a domed ceiling that showed a holographic display of the galaxy itself. Seating was arranged in concentric circles with the speaker's platform at the center. It was meant to make speakers feel small, to remind them that they spoke before the gathered powers of known space. Elena didn't feel small. She felt angry. She had spent the past week being debriefed, examined by doctors, and reunited with her family, She had attended memorial services for the 312 humans who died in the rescue operation. She had spoken with their families, looked into the eyes of parents and children and spouses who had lost people they loved. She had carried that weight with her as she prepared for this moment. The chamber was unusually full today. What had happened at Zathi Prime had shocked the galaxy. Species that had coexisted peacefully with humanity for decades suddenly realized they didn't know their neighbors as well as they thought. Some were frightened. Some were outraged. All wanted answers. The Karathi ambassador, Elder Valen, spoke first. He was one of the oldest beings in the chamber, having served on the council for over a century. Ambassador Reyes, we are grateful for your safe return. However, the actions of your military have raised serious concerns. The destruction of Zathi military infrastructure went far beyond a rescue operation. Many on this council believe humanity acted with excessive force. Elena let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice clear and firm. Elder Valen, with respect, you're wrong. Not about the facts. Yes, Earth's military disabled Zathi military installations, but about it being excessive. Let me explain what actually happened. She gestured and a holographic display appeared above the speaker's platform. It showed Kepler 7 station. 7 days ago I was attending a diplomatic summit on neutral ground. Neutral ground protected by treaties that every species in this chamber has signed. The Zathi violated those treaties. They launched a military operation on civilian territory. They kidnapped diplomatic personnel. They threatened to execute us if their demands weren't met. The display shifted to show the Zathi message. They gave Earth 72 hours to surrender 12 colony worlds. Worlds where millions of humans live. Worlds that have been inhabited for decades. They thought we would negotiate. They thought we would calculate the value of 5 lives against millions and make the logical choice. But humanity doesn't work that way, Elena continued. We don't calculate the worth of individual lives like that. Every human life has value. Not theoretical value. Not political value. Real absolute value. When Commander Vrath took us hostage, he didn't just kidnap 5 people. He attacked something fundamental to who we are. The Velian representative stood, her blue skin darkening with emotion, but the response was disproportionate. Hundreds of Zathi installations destroyed, their military crippled. For 5 people, how can you justify such destruction? Elena turned to face her directly. Ambassador Kelra, tell me something. 3 years ago, the Zathi took your sister. She was your trade envoy to their space. They held her for 6 months, demanding concessions. Your government negotiated. You gave them what they wanted. Your sister came home. Do you know what lesson the Zathi learned? Kelra's face showed discomfort. That we value peace. That taking hostages works, Elena interrupted. After you, they took a Karathi scientist. Then a Fen merchant. Then others. Each time they got what they wanted because their victims calculated that one life wasn't worth a war. They built an entire strategy around it, and they kept doing it because no one stopped them. She looked around the chamber. Until they took one of ours. Until they pushed humanity and we pushed back. And now suddenly everyone is concerned about proportional response. Where was this concern when the Zathi were building an empire on hostage-taking? Where were the consequences? The sanctions? The military action? We rely on diplomacy, Elder Valen said. On reasoned discussion and compromise. Not military force? And how's that working out? Elena asked bluntly. The Zathi have been violating treaties and taking hostages for 5 years. You've held how many committee meetings? Passed how many strongly worded resolutions? And what changed? Nothing. Because bullies don't respond to words. They respond to consequences. She gestured at the display, which now showed the aftermath of the battle. Yes, we destroyed Zathi military installations. Yes, we crippled their ability to project force. But look at what we didn't destroy. Civilian areas, cities, infrastructure, food production, medical facilities. If we were the warmongers some of you are trying to paint us as, Zathi Prime would be a lifeless rock. Instead, civilian casualties were 0. 0. We could have done much worse, Elena continued. We had 600 warships in their space. We had the capability to reduce their planet to ash. But we didn't, because we're not monsters. We're not conquerors. We simply refuse to be victims. The chamber erupted in voices. Some supportive, some angry, all talking over each other. The council president called for order, her voice amplified to override the noise. Ambassador Reyes, the president said, you speak of principles and protection, but where does it end? If every species responded to provocation with overwhelming military force, this entire sector would be constantly at war. That's exactly my point, Elena said. It doesn't end with us. It ends with the Zathi, and with every other species that might consider hostage-taking as a political tool. We sent a message. A very clear message. You can negotiate with humanity. You can trade with us, ally with us, even compete with us. But you cannot take our people. You cannot threaten us into submission. You cannot use terror as a negotiating tactic. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've spent 20 years as a diplomat. I've negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements. I've worked to build bridges between species and cultures. I believe in diplomacy. I believe in peaceful resolution of conflicts. But I also understand something that some in this chamber seem to have forgotten. Peace doesn't just happen. It's maintained by the willingness to defend it. A new voice spoke up. Ambassador Chen from the human delegation stood. If I may, I'd like to add some context. Earth's military response wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated to achieve specific objectives. First, rescue our people. Second, prevent this from happening again. Third, send a message to the galaxy about our red lines. Chen activated her own display showing military readiness assessments. For 37 years, humanity has been building a fleet. Not for conquest, not for expansion, but because we learned long ago that the best way to avoid war is to be too strong to attack. Every ship in our fleet was built for defense, for protection, and when one of ours was taken, we used that fleet exactly as intended, to protect our people. But you could have negotiated, insisted the Fen representative. You could have found a diplomatic solution, could we? Chen asked. The Zathi made their position clear. Surrender the colonies or watch our people die. That's not negotiation, that's extortion. And humanity has a policy we've maintained for over 2 centuries. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Not because we're stubborn, but because negotiating encourages more terrorism. Elena stepped forward again. Let me tell you what it was like in that cell. Waiting. Wondering if Earth would abandon us to save millions of others. Wondering if we were expendable. Commander Vrath was so confident. He told me humanity would calculate the costs and choose the logical option. He had studied us. He knew we valued peace. He thought he understood us. Her voice grew harder, but he didn't understand the most important thing about humanity. We're pack animals. We form bonds that transcend logic. A human soldier will charge into enemy fire to save a wounded comrade, even though logically one life isn't worth the risk. A human parent will sacrifice everything for their child. A human will stand up to a bully even when the smart move is to walk away. It's not rational. It's not logical. It's human. And that's what the Zathi didn't understand, Elena continued. They saw our diplomacy and thought we were weak. They saw our compassion and thought we were easy targets. They made calculations based on logic. But humans aren't purely logical creatures. We're driven by emotion, by loyalty, by principles that don't always make mathematical sense. And one of our deepest principles is this. We don't abandon our own. She looked directly at Elder Valen. You asked where it ends. It ends with understanding. Every species in this galaxy now knows exactly where humanity's line is. You can compete with us economically. You can disagree with us politically. You can even oppose us diplomatically. But if you take one of ours, if you threaten our people, if you try to use terror and violence to force our hand, then you get the fleet, all of it, and nothing will stop us from bringing our people home. The Karathi elder sat back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. You speak with great passion, Ambassador. But passion fades. What happens when another crisis emerges? When another species tests your resolve? Then they'll learn the same lesson the Zathi learned. The session ended without a formal resolution. The council couldn't officially endorse what humanity had done, but they couldn't condemn it either. The reality was too complex, the justification too clear, the results too effective. As the representatives filed out, Elena remained on the speaker's platform. She felt drained. The past week had been the hardest of her life, but she had done what needed to be done. She had explained humanity's actions, had defended the principles that drove them, had ensured that the galaxy understood. Admiral Webb appeared at her side. He had been watching from the observer's gallery. You did well, Ambassador. They heard you. Did I convince them? Elena asked. Some of them, Webb replied. The rest will come around in time. Or they won't. Either way, they understand now. They know what we are, what we're capable of, what we stand for. 312 people died to save me and my team, Elena said quietly. How do I live with that? By making sure their sacrifice meant something, Webb said. By ensuring that no other species tries what the Zyathi tried. By being the best damn ambassador humanity has ever had. Those people died doing what humanity does best. Protecting our own. You honor them by continuing to serve. Elena nodded slowly. She thought about the memorial service, about the faces of the families, about the young ensign who would never see his daughter grow up, about the veteran pilot who had been 2 weeks from retirement, about all of them who had answered the call without hesitation. We need to do better, she said. As a species, as a civilization, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, to anyone. Agreed, Webb said. That's why I'm proposing something to Earth Command. A new initiative. We build a rapid response force, smaller than the full fleet but always ready. If anyone, anywhere in the galaxy takes hostages, threatens civilians, engages in terrorism, we respond, not just to protect humans, but to protect everyone. Elena looked at him in surprise. You want humanity to be the galaxy's protector? I want humanity to stand for something, Webb corrected. Right now, we're known as the species that crossed the galaxy for 5 people. That's good. But I want us to be known as the species that stands against injustice. Period. Not because we're superior, but because we can. Because we have the strength and the will to do what's right even when it's hard. The Council will never approve that. They don't have to, Webb said with a slight smile. We're not asking permission. We're informing them of our intentions. Any species that doesn't want our protection can opt out, but I'm betting most will appreciate having someone watching their backs. Elena considered it. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious, but it was also very human. They didn't just want to protect themselves. They wanted to protect everyone. Because that's what pack animals did. They protected the pack, and to humanity, the pack was everyone who deserved protection. It could work, she said slowly, if we do it right, if we're truly impartial, if we act only against clear violations of civilized norms. That's the idea, Webb agreed. We're not looking to be rulers or conquerors, just guardians. It's what we've always been. We're just making it official. 3 months later, the Terran Protection Initiative was announced. It was voluntary. Species could request protection or decline it. Humanity would maintain a rapid response force capable of deploying anywhere in known space within 48 hours. They would act against terrorism, hostage-taking, and acts of aggression against civilian populations. The response was mixed. Some species were grateful, others were suspicious. But slowly, cautiously, the galaxy began to accept it. Because the truth was, many species were like the Velians and Karathi. They valued peace but lacked the military strength or will to enforce it. Having humanity as a backstop, as a last line of defense against the worst actors, provided security. The Zyathi watched all this from their homeworld. They had received no punishment beyond the dismantling of their military. No occupation, no war crimes trials beyond Commander Vrath and his co-conspirators, no ongoing restrictions beyond monitoring. Earth could have destroyed them but chose not to. Chancellor Mordath, addressing the Zyathi Council, put it simply, we gambled that humanity was weak. We lost, but in losing we learned something valuable. Humanity is not weak. They are restrained. There is a vast difference. We are alive because they chose mercy. We must never forget that, and we must never give them reason to choose otherwise. Commander Vrath, in his cell awaiting trial, had come to a similar understanding. He had studied humanity, had read their history, analyzed their psychology, calculated their responses, and he had missed the most important thing. That sometimes beings act on principle rather than calculation. That sometimes loyalty and compassion aren't weaknesses but the greatest strengths imaginable. He would spend the rest of his life in a human prison. It was clean and humane, far better than any Zyathi prison. His guards were professional and fair. He received good food, medical care, even educational opportunities. It was punishment, yes, but administered with a strange dignity that the Zyathi justice system never showed. And every day he was reminded of what he had awakened. The guards who watched him, the humans who processed him, the judges who would try him. They all carried themselves with quiet confidence. They were people who knew their civilization had crossed the galaxy to save 5 of their own, who knew they were part of something larger than themselves. who understood that they belonged to a species that valued loyalty above all else. 5 years later, Ambassador Elena Reyes gave a speech at the memorial for those who died in the rescue. Families of the fallen attended. So did many of the Reapers who had participated in the operation, veterans from the fleet, and representatives from across the galaxy who came to pay respects. "We gather here," Elena said, standing before the memorial wall that bore 312 names, "to honor those who gave everything so that 5 people could come home. To some it might seem like an unequal trade, 5 lives for 312. But those who think that way don't understand what happened here. These people didn't die just to save me and my team," she continued. "They died to defend a principle. The principle that every life matters, that no one is expendable, that humanity stands together. They died so that every human, everywhere in the galaxy, knows that they are never alone, that if they're taken, if they're threatened, if they're in danger, humanity is coming, all of us, with everything we have." She looked at the families in the audience. "Your loved ones are heroes, not because they won a battle, not because they killed enemies, but because they volunteered to risk everything for people they didn't know. Because when they heard that 5 humans were in danger, they didn't ask if it was worth it. They asked how fast they could get there. The Zathi thought a hostage would save them," Elena said. "They thought taking 5 people would give them power over millions. They were wrong. Because humanity doesn't work that way. We don't calculate the worth of individuals against the collective. We don't abandon people because rescuing them is hard or expensive or dangerous. We do whatever it takes always." She placed her hand on the memorial wall. "These names are written in stone. But the lesson they taught is written in the stars, written in the memory of every species that saw what humanity did. We are pack animals. We protect our own, and nothing in this universe can stand against us when we decide to act." The ceremony ended. People filed past the memorial, touching names, leaving flowers, sharing memories. And throughout the galaxy, on human ships and stations and colonies, the story was told and retold. The story of how 5 people were taken, and 600 ships came to bring them home. It became humanity's defining moment, the event that showed the galaxy who humans really were, not conquerors or warriors or diplomats, but all of those things and more. A species capable of great violence and great mercy, of calculated strategy and passionate loyalty, of building civilizations and crossing galaxies. Most importantly, a species that valued every individual, that refused to write anyone off as acceptable losses, that would pay any price to bring their people home. The Zathi had thought a hostage would save them. Instead, they learned what the rest of the galaxy would soon understand. That humanity's compassion was matched only by its capacity for action. That the species that wrote poetry about love and peace could wage war with terrifying efficiency. That the beings who valued individual lives above all else were the most dangerous when those lives were threatened. Earth had shown the galaxy something profound, something that would echo through the centuries. That sometimes, the strongest civilizations are those that refuse to sacrifice their principles for convenience. That loyalty isn't weakness but the foundation of true strength. That a civilization that values every individual is far more powerful than one that treats people as statistics. And most of all, that when you take what belongs to humanity, you don't gain leverage. You gain an enemy that will cross the galaxy, fight impossible odds, and pay any price to take back what's theirs. The message was clear. The lesson was taught. And the galaxy would never forget the day humanity showed what it truly meant to stand together. They thought a hostage would save them.